Welcome back to the shop. I'm Jeff from Today's Craftsman.
I'm John.
And today we're talking about veneer. So veneer is a subject that's shrouded in mystery for a lot of people and trepidation. So John put out the call on YouTube on his channel for your questions about veneer. And I put out a call for questions on Instagram. So we've taken 5 pages of questions here and we're condensing them down into 10.
Yeah, a lot of them are kind of similar.
Yeah, so there's a lot of areas that we got questions on, and we'll get into those, but we're gonna read off your questions and answer them as best we can.
Sounds good. Want to get started?
Yeah. So our first question is from Timothy Creasy, 2161 on YouTube, and he asks, my question would be the order of application. Would you do the front, back, sides, or the top first?
That's a good question, and basically you're just thinking, with veneer, what are you going to see? So in this case, for the most part, a lot of people aren't finishing the back unless you're using the piece of furniture as a room divider, and in that case you would finish the back. But let's just say that you're not finishing the back, you would do the 2 sides and then the top. You're always covering the seams. So if you did the back first, or if you wanted a piece with a finished back, you would do the back first, then the sides would cover the back seams, then you would do the top last, and the top would cover the top seams.
Yeah, so basically, whatever your show face is, the one that's going to be seen the most, you want to do that last.
Absolutely.
So that you're capping off all your other seams.
Yeah, definitely, that works.
Cool, yeah, so if you had like a built-in that was dying into a wall on one side and you had an end panel on the other side, you probably want to do that end panel last.
It's specific to every project. You're basically, even though the seam is a hairline seam, it's like anything, you just want it to look its best, so you're going to try to hide that seam.
Right.
If you're looking at a piece of furniture from the top down and you veneered the top first, you would see those little seams of the end pieces.
Right. Oh, that's good. So hopefully that helped out, Timothy. Our next question here is from Dan Yotis, and Dan is a frequent commenter on the channel, so we appreciate that. We should say that if you ever have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments. That way we can potentially make a video about it. So
definitely.
Always looking for good ideas. Dan wants to know, what's a good starter project for beginners to try out veneer? He said that he's always wanted to try it because you always make it look so easy.
Well, it really is easy. Don't be intimidated by veneer. And my suggestion is make something small, like a box. So you can make a jewelry box. I have a little trash bin that I have plans for, and it's on my channel. It's really simple. You don't really need plans for it. It's that's the one with the painted inside. So yeah, just make a small box, or if you don't even want to make a box, you could make a picture frame, and you could veneer the pieces of molding. I thought I had some here. The pieces of molding before you make the frame. So that's a nice, simple way to do that.
Yeah, I think did you do that with the monkey pod?
I did, and I'm hoping I don't walk off camera because, that works.
Oh yeah.
Because we have the camera on a little gimbal here, so it's a little new for us. But this is a piece of mahogany, and I was making a monkey pod end table, and I always edge band first. We might probably get to a comment or a question like that. But because I didn't have any monkey pod lumber to do the edge banding, I veneered it first. And so you can imagine, cut a few miters in this, and you can make a picture frame.
Yeah, and you can do cross grain, so you can never do this in solid wood. You would take this piece and just, with the lightest pressure, just snap this.
Yes.
So now you have this long grain that's supporting the piece, but you have the cross grain look. So you could do something really unique. You could do 45-degree grain if you wanted to.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's so many possibilities. I always say that with veneer. It just opens up so many design options. And you can look at this. I mean, Jeff can see it because he's right here in person, but this veneer was veneered to this piece of mahogany maybe 6 or 8 months ago. And you can see it's not moving anywhere. It hasn't expanded. It's very stable.
Yeah.
And that's done with contact cement.
Nice. Hopefully that helps, Dan. And just try it out, Even if you just get some cheap veneer, find the cheapest thing you can get, and just start slapping it on some wood, Trim it.
And you could even make your own veneer if you just wanted to play around. I mean, you could resaw some 1/8 or 1/16 inch material on the bandsaw, if you've got a decent bandsaw, and then just use some contact cement, and veneer that way. Just see how it goes.
Yeah. Practice makes perfect, so you're gonna screw up. So.
Yeah, start small.
Yeah.
You don't want to screw up on a big project.
No, I've been there. All right, so our next question is from D. Furla. This is a bit of a long question. So he gives some context to the question. I'm doing a big veneering project now, a vintage-looking stereo cabinet with closed shelving for the components and drawers for the records. I want to add veneer to the inside shelves and to the inside walls where the drawers are going. Additionally, I want to do the face of the plywood using veneer and not solid wood. I think he means like the edge banding. Have not seen any videos on adding veneer to the inside and how you would handle cutting to size the veneer. And I also use dados for the vertical separators, so those pieces would need the veneer to be short so the dado would fit. May not be clear, but I can send you photos if you like. Basically, I think he's asking, hopefully you haven't already built this, because I think this is going to answer your question. He has a cabinet that's already built, and he needs to now veneer the inside. How's he going to go about?
Veneering the inside is difficult because generally when you're veneering, you're trimming the edge off with a flush cut bit in the router. Mm-hmm. If I had to veneer the inside of a cabinet, I would start at the bottom. You'd have to cut it perfect.
Exact.
You'd have to, yeah, it would have to be exact. So obviously you're going to dry fit it first. And then I would do the two sides. You're probably not going to do the top.
Like the
underside. Yeah, because it's going to be the underside. You'll never see it. So that's one sort of give me there. And with the sides, I would probably, you're going to use some tape, some painter's tape, because you don't want to get the contact cement onto the bottom piece. Mm-hmm. Again, cut it to size. Maybe for the side pieces, I'd cut it just a hair small.
Yeah, so have a little gap at the top.
Yeah, just a tiny little gap at the top. And instead of using the sticks to help position your veneer so it doesn't stick to the substrate, you could use plastic drop cloth.
Yeah, I've done that.
So I think that's the best way to handle the inside. Mm-hmm. As far as the dado, I kind of got lost there.
I think he's saying, so he's got a bottom and he's got a vertical partition that's sitting in a dado, so the veneer would have to run short.
Maybe you can cut it if the dado's already there.
Yeah, I mean, here's what the best thing to do is before you put this thing together is veneer all the pieces.
I have a feeling that this is a piece of furniture that he's refinishing, so it's already built, right?
I had that thought too. He said a vintage-looking stereo cabinet, so I wasn't sure if he was veneering something that was already built or if he was in the process of building it. But if you could take it apart, even if it's already something built, if you could take it apart and then veneer it, you have to make your dado just two thicknesses of the veneer wider. That's the way to go.
Definitely. So I have some open cabinets, and before I put the cabinets together, I veneered the inside.
Yep.
Because the inside of the cabinet is ash and the outside is zebra wood, and there's really there's no easy way to veneer the inside of the cabinet, especially if you're also veneering the back.
Yeah, and this is something that we might get into, the reason why you like to use veneer instead of like a veneer plywood. Yeah. In this instance, you could use a veneer plywood to build this.
That's right.
Then you have a full veneered inside without having to apply any veneer, and then you wrap the outside, covering up your butt joints with the veneer. Yeah,
that's actually a really good example of that.
So hopefully that helps. Hopefully you didn't build this cabinet already, because it's going to be tough. But one thing I would say is, like, if you're able to flip this thing around so the part that you're veneering is down, like you could do the bottom and then turn it and then do that side with the side down.
The hard part is also going to be trimming the veneer when it's already on the inside, because you can only use a flush cut bit so far until it dead ends into the one side of the box.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to use a razor blade or some sandpaper. It's going to take some finessing.
Yeah. So if you don't have to use a veneer, maybe wait and try it on another project.
That's definitely some good advice.
Hopefully you're not crushing your dreams here. All right, our next one is from, some of these names you have to make some assumptions.
You'll do way better than I would.
Carbon Fe. What needs to be done to prepare the substrate? Do you need to sand to a specific grit, and how worried are you about things being perfectly flat?
I want things to be perfectly flat
Yeah.
because veneer is really thin, it's going to telegraph. So all of your fasteners need to be filled. I edge band before I veneer almost all the time, and that's probably something we'll get into in another question or two. So your edge banding, you don't want your edge banding to be proud of your cabinet, or that's going to telegraph. So it is really important to have that surface as smooth as you possibly can get it.
And what grit do you sand to?
Well, for plywood, I'm not sanding that much because it's already finished plywood.
Yeah.
But generally, so if I'm putting an edge on something and I have just a hair that needs to be sanded down, I'll probably start with 120 and probably just finish to 120. It doesn't need to be any more than that.
Yeah, so when I've done stuff, if I'm like surface, like I like to just quickly go over everything just to take any grease or grime that might be on there that might inhibit the adhesion. 120 is usually what I'll go to.
120 is a go-to piece of sandpaper in my shop.
Yeah.
I don't go, it's like very rarely am I at 80 and very rarely am I anything higher than 180.
Yeah, where 180 is where we stop prepping wood.
220, 320 for finish.
Right, yeah, we'll go 320. We're going 400, 600 now on top coat scuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Might have to do a video on that.
Yeah. All right, so 120, you should be pretty good. Here's Tony B, 2760. Why is veneer so expensive, or it seems to be?
I mean, I don't really think veneer is that expensive. It depends on the species that you're getting.
Yeah.
So you can find veneer for $100 or maybe even as low as 80. But then you can get up to $1,200.
Yeah.
I think the most expensive veneer that I've used is about $625. That was for highly figured Claro walnut.
Imagine buying 32 square feet, 32 board feet of Claro walnut. It's going to be far more than 600.
And when it comes to trying to buy that in plywood, it's just not going to be available. The amount of species that are available in veneer are not going to be available generally in solid wood. You're going to really have to hunt them down. Really depends on where you live. And you're not going to be able to get them in 4x8 plywood sheets.
Right.
Some you will, but the majority, the amount of options that you have with veneer just far outweigh what you have in regular plywood.
And so you can go online and you can order a Claro walnut veneer, and they're going to ship it to your house in a box just like that.
That's a nice thing, and we'll get to that in a minute too, because I'll put a piece of veneer out and we'll spread it out so you can see how it arrives when you order it, because generally you're going to have it shipped. You're probably not going to go somewhere and pick it up.
Right. Yeah, and we're going to talk about that, where to find the veneer. But it's nice and compact. You're not picking up a full sheet, a 4x8, which you might not be able to get. And if you're just like a regular woodworker, you don't have access to plywood with these exotic veneers. You can't find it at Home Depot. Yeah,
and then you're going to have to go through all these different sheets to try to find the one sheet you like. Where with veneer, it just seems every sheet always looks pretty nice.
Yeah, and some of the sites that I use for like flitch veneer, like not sheets of veneer, but I don't know what you would call it, unstitched veneer.
Okay, yeah.
They'll actually show you pictures, and you can look at the lot. Like I have some Macassar ebony upstairs, and I saw every piece in that lot of veneer before I bought it. So you're able to see and decide, what you're going to use. I should have pulled that out. That's nice stuff.
Excuse me.
So it's not that expensive. You can get a sheet of maple 4x8 for maybe $60.
Yeah, it's really similar to lumber. Some lumber is going to be more expensive than others. Some veneer is going to be more expensive than others.
So try it out, Tony. It's not too bad. Okay, we're segueing into this question that I was talking about before from William Smith-C4I. Where do you get your veneer? I've only ever see the plywood hider strips at Home Depot, Lowe's. I think maybe he means edge banding.
Yeah, maybe that's what you're talking about. I generally get my veneer from a place called GL Veneer. They work with me on a lot of my projects on YouTube. And so they have a big variety. And generally it's always the same. I usually use 10 millimeter, and we might get into that.
Yep.
But you're gonna buy it online. So you're gonna basically just do a Google search. You can check out GeoVeneer, you can do a Google search for Veneer by you. If you have the opportunity to travel 10 or 15 minutes and actually touch and see the veneer in person, I recommend it, because it's like anything. If I can look at a board, I'd rather actually look at a board and buy it instead of just sort of, buying it online. But with veneer, you often don't have that option.
Yeah, I think places like maybe like Rockler and Woodcraft might sell smaller pieces of veneer. I don't think they sell full 4x8s. And you're typically going to get a better value out of buying a 4x8 or a 4x10. Your square foot price is going to be a little bit less than buying like a 2 foot by 4 foot section or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Did PSA veneer come in here?
It did. I didn't select that, but we can ask it. We can get into that question too.
Do you want to just mention it real quick right now, or do you
Yeah.
want to? Oh no, I'll wait till we get into the other things.
Okay.
If you're going to talk about contact cement versus a vacuum bag or whatever.
Yeah, I think I have that.
I'm getting you out of line here. Sorry.
Yeah,
about
no,
that.
it's all right. I mean, we have a lot of questions. We could go on. We could do them all. This is from Ed H. 1919. What essential specialty tools are required for a beginner? So what's the bare minimum to get into doing veneer?
Yeah, so there's not too much to it, and I brought some tools with me here. A lot of people think about the J-roller.
Yep.
You know what, maybe I'll go ahead and just pull the sheet out of the box.
Yeah.
Why not, right?
We're not inadvertently, but we're covering a lot of the questions that we're not explicitly reading off.
So your veneer is going to come in a box like this, and this is a special, really expensive veneer tool. Just kidding. These are bean bags for corn toss.
Oh, cool.
And I use these because they're not going to harm the veneer, and this allows me to just chuck these bean bags at the veneer, and it will kind of take some of that curl out of it. So when I'm getting ready to work on a piece, this will start to take the curl out of the veneer.
Is this the fumed
This is.
I can smell.
Well, this actually isn't fumed. The
okay.
fumed is dark.
Okay.
But this is eucalyptus veneer. It's highly figured. I mean, check that out.
Yeah, yeah. It looks like almost like curly oak or something.
Yeah, right? It's got a nice look to it. I'm going
that's
to
really
do something
nice.
with this pretty soon. So, of course, you have your veneer. You have your little corn toss bags. Anything you can use to weight down the veneer to try to take that curl out of it so you can start cutting it. Cutting it, you're only going to need a razor knife. Get a sharp one, put a new blade in your knife. Straight edge, 2 foot framing square. The straight edge I use is a 8 foot piece of aluminum that I just have.
Could probably use a T-square, clamp it on one
Oh,
end.
that's the thing. I thought I had a squeeze clamp, but squeeze clamps, because you are going to squeeze clamp your straight edges in place, so when you're making that cut, you don't move.
Especially when you're cutting with the grain.
Yeah.
Your knife is going to want to follow the grain. So, anytime if you're doing something with a marking knife with the grain, you'll get that knife to walk away from your straight edge, or even push your straight edge.
Sure.
All the time.
Sure. So every time when you make a cut, at least clamp one side of it. So if I'm using a 2 foot square and I'm squaring off of a shorter piece for a cross cut, I might only clamp the side closest to me and then just use the square here. But yeah, you don't want that square to move around because you don't want to make a mistake. So you have your razor knife. A lot of people think of J-rollers. I very rarely use a J-roller now.
So we had a question, J-roller versus hard block
So
from Lang Woodworks.
a lot of times I'll use the J-roller just to kind of get started. So the veneer gets in position. Once I'm confident that I've got the right overhang all around, I'll pick up one side, remove one of the sticks, and start to work the veneer. Once I have the veneer down, sort of working it with my hand first, then I'll do a quick run with the J-roller, just kind of going from the middle out, in case there's any air bubbles, which there shouldn't be if you've taken your time and worked it to the edge. But then to get a much better bond, This is just a piece of plywood with a round over on it, and that you're putting your, you're putting your body weight into it, and you're getting a lot more pressure on this one little point here than you would on this J roller. So you really don't even need a J roller. I happen to have one, so I tend to use it a little bit. Other than that, a router with a flush cut bit. To apply the veneer, let's talk about contact cement. I'm generally using the solvent-based contact cement. I just have more confidence in its bond.
That's another question we had. What do you think about water-based contact versus solvent-based contact?
I've used both, and I used water-based on a recent project, and I had an issue with it. If you saw that video, I might have made a second video about that.
I have a can here if we want to show.
Okay, yeah, that's the solvent base. That's the DAP Weldwood. That's what I use all the time. So Weldwood also makes a water-based, and it works. But my feeling, I like the solvent base because it's just one less thing I have to worry about.
And it will flash off much faster.
Yes.
And I typically don't use contact cement. I use I don't use this type of contact cement. I use a spray contact cement. We have a video about doing laminate. I don't do a lot of veneer, but I do laminate, which in principle, very similar.
Sure.
It's basically just a resin-based veneer. I've used the non-flammable, which is like more of a water-based, and I've used the flammable. The non-flammable, so we test it to see if it's tacky. The non-flammable it basically stays tacky forever. It never really feels dry.
So when you're building something, you're always dealing with like confidence levels of the products that you're using. And for me, it's like one less thing I have to think about. If I'm confident that, okay, this solvent-based contact cement, I have a lot of history with it, this is right, and I use it often enough, so I don't have to think about that.
Yeah.
The only reason why I will sometimes use a water-based is, really, I was just trying to get away from the solvent.
Yeah.
And then I decided,
smells, but
yeah, it's a really strong smell. So you've got to wear a respirator. You got to open up the windows and doors. So you have that. I apply, like Jeff has a 5-gallon canister that you spray with.
yeah.
And that's nice because you get a really nice coat. You get a very even coat. Where with the you can pull that out. Sure.
So this sucker's pretty full.
Here, I'll put something down here. You can put it right on top of this.
So this is, it looks like almost a helium tank or like a refrigerant tank. And we have a spray gun. So this is pressurized glue. And you spray it out of here like you're painting. So
after you use that, do you have to clean that?
No. So you never want to close this tank after you open it.
Okay.
Because then all of this adhesive is going to dry inside here. So you keep this thing under pressure. I let this skin over. It's like it's getting sealed. When I'm ready to use it, I pick that off. I clean it with some MEK, and it's ready to go.
All right, good to know. Yeah, if you're getting into a big job, I would go to something like this. But for the small pieces of furniture that I make, and when I say small pieces of furniture, they're normal size pieces we're not making dollhouse furniture. But we're also not doing panels. We're not doing wall panels. So for projects like that, I use either a 6 or a 9-inch mohair roller.
You ever use something like this?
So this is great for small projects.
Yeah, so if you're just getting started, you can always try that.
This is probably great for the person who just wants to make a jewelry box or like that trash can that I mentioned earlier, because now you're not dealing with the cleanup mess of the Weldwood contact cement here. Talk about cleanup. Once you use that roller, it's done.
Yeah.
So the way I'm able to get a whole project done with one roller and one pan is I line the painter pan with tinfoil, and then I make a tinfoil lid. And so I can work with contact cement for 2 or 3 days. As long as when I'm done working with it, I put the tinfoil lid back on it, close it up, and I keep it on the floor of my shop because the floor is the coldest.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can continue to just keep working on it.
Yeah, because it works through evaporation. So if you trap all that in there, it's not going to evaporate and dry,
Absolutely. So the only other tool would be a throwaway brush. So, you know, you're going to pour your contact cement in your paint pan, clean off your lid, and so both the throwaway brush and the paint roller stay there. Once I'm done, you just roll up the tin foil, throw out the roller, and that's basically it, really.
Don't you love when you get the contact cement, like, you know, in your forearm
Yeah.
hair? That's the best. So not much. Router, good straight edge, razor knife.
Yeah, it doesn't take too much to get into it at all. And that's where we're talking about using contact cement. If you're using other applications, which we may get into, then you've got to get into something more.
Yeah.
Do you want to get into that now, like the vacuum bag?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've never used a vacuum bag. I really like using contact cement because it works with the way I like to design furniture. Now, you like to use a vacuum bag, or you have used one, you have experience with it.
We should have brought that over. It's a little big to demonstrate here, but so I have a vacuum bag. It's 5 feet by 12 feet. It's a polyethylene bag. So it's a clear plastic. Imagine like what a pool float's made out of. Reminds me of that. It's like a thick, clear plastic, and it has a nipple on it. So you close it up, you put a hose onto this nipple, and I have a vacuum pump, and it sucks all the air out. So it basically squeezes everything down.
So for that, you're using Type-On 3.
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of glues. There's veneer-specific glues, Unibond, which is like I think an epoxy-based glue. There's a ton of different veneering glues, and they all have their different applications. Some have different colors, some have different levels of flexibility. So if you're doing curved work or flat work, you may use different glues, but typically that's what we'll use, or just like a white PVA glue. So if we have to do something flat, it's nice to be able to get it in there and get that nice pressure down.
Sure.
You know, and then we don't have to use contact cement and deal with trying to stick something down one shot. So we didn't talk about that. With the contact cement, you only really have one shot to get that thing. Not really, you only have one shot. We did get a question about trying to reposition.
Yeah, as far as the reposition on contact cement, you really can't.
Yeah.
You can panic and break out a clothes iron and try to, you know, make it happen. On a small project, you might get lucky.
Yeah.
But the trick is to don't get in that position. You have all the time in the world before you go and put the pressure down, and that's why you're going to use those sticks
Right here.
to, you know, Jeff's got a bunch of dowels, you know, just wooden dowels.
So let's say you wanted to veneer this, and this is your veneer. You'd lay your sticks out. You know, you make sure that you get this positioned exactly where you want it. You work from one end. I tend to go from the middle, so I'll pull this one out, stick it down, and then work in either direction. But same difference. You can stick one side, and then, you know, lay your veneer down.
So I always find that the purist, I don't know if that's the right term, but tend to kind of turn their nose up at contact cement. Do you see that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard it.
Okay, so the reason why I like to use contact cement is because the only reason why I'm veneering is because I want to wrap the cabinet, and I don't want to use traditional edge banding. So the order of building something is build the box, edge band the box, veneer the box. And I can't use a vacuum press to apply the veneer if the box is already built.
Right.
And the reason why I want to build that way is I don't want to build it with a specialty plywood instead of using veneer and rely on getting perfect miters. And I don't want to have a seam when I edge band, right?
Right, if you had like a butt joint.
Yeah, so if I were to build the box and veneer the box and then apply the edge banding, I'm going to have a seam all the way around the cabinet.
Yeah.
By applying the edge banding first, and I generally use like a 1/2 inch or 3/8 or 1/4 inch, anywhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch, and then the veneer goes over that disappears.
You find that you don't get a line in the face on the edge banding where the veneer...
I haven't, no.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, the purist, I think, would use like hide glue and a hammer and do it the old school way. So
And
Contact cement is just a easier, more effective way of doing it.
Yeah, so I've had plenty of pieces of furniture that were made the old school way, where the veneer has delaminated. I've been doing veneer projects now with contact cement for 30 years, and I have no delamination problems.
Yeah, so high glue, is not heat resistant. You can see right here, high heat resistant. So this sitting in the sun, it's going to stay adhered over time. Where something like high glue liquefies with heat. That's how it works. You put it into a pot of hot water.
All right.
So that has the potential to delaminate.
Yeah, so my feeling is using contact cement is just easier, and it works for the designs that I want to make. So I've just never, I've never worked with hot glue, and I'm always trying to keep things simple. I just kind of want to get the piece done. And really, it also comes down to just never having an issue. And like you can see how this monkey pod, this is on here stronger today than it was when it first went on. And where the residue of the contact cement, that's almost hard now.
Yep.
It's not like a gummy substance anymore. It's almost like a finish.
Yeah. And I've never used them, but I know guys like Corey at CT Woodwork, they use this technique sometimes. There are glues that are, I don't think they're PVA, but it's like a regular wood glue that you can spread on. You can put your veneer and actually iron it and get it to stick.
And I've seen those, and I've seen people do that on YouTube, but I just don't do it because I have something that works for me.
Right.
I think that's how anything is. Once you find something that works and you don't have to deal with guesswork anymore, and you can just get down to the project, you're almost better off doing that. Kind of do what you know. You don't
have to reinvent the wheel. If you have a way to do it, stick with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been guilty of doing things like that before, especially with finishes. Like, oh, I have this great finish that works, but let me try something new, and next thing you know, you have an issue. So with me and veneer projects, I'm pretty much sticking with the solvent-based contact cement and just doing it the way I always do. One thing I always say in all my videos is I tend to use 2 coats because the first coat really sucks into the substrate and often the back of the veneer. It almost feels like there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So when you're spraying that tank, you're putting on a lot more material than I'm putting on.
Typically I'm box coating, so you come one direction and then you come back perpendicular. So you're getting, and that shoots it's like a net.
Yeah.
So it's coming out as like this net almost. So you need to fill in sort of the blank spot. Here's a good one from Lang Woodworks on Instagram. What's the go-to core material? MDF, HDF, chipboard, plywood?
Okay. So I say plywood. Jeff and I were just talking earlier this week, and you were saying MDF.
Yeah, so like if I was doing something and had to apply veneer, I would use HDF. It's super stable, it's super flat. I just have a lot of bad experience with plywood moving.
Okay, really?
Plywood turns into a potato chip a lot of times.
Okay.
So HDF I think is a really good.
I might go that way. After talking with Jeff, I was thinking there's certain projects where I would use HDF. My biggest issue is fasteners.
Yeah.
Just getting a good, building a box, getting a good strong hold.
So it's really going to be heavy.
Yeah. So it really depends on the project. One thing that's kind of new to me that I'll share is I'm thinking about staying away from Baltic birch plywood when I build anything, because I feel like the Baltic birch tends to make fasteners telegraph more than any of the other plywoods. So I have pieces that I've built that go way back, just like I said, almost 30 years. And they're perfect boxes. You can't see the fasteners. And I have other pieces that I've recently built with Baltic, and I can see a little bump. So what that's telling me is the Baltic birch has contracted a little bit, and the Bondo, I'm using Bondo for fill, has remained the same. And if you look at it at a certain light, you can sort of see where that is. And it's only happened on the Baltic birch plywood projects that I've built. So I don't know why that is.
Well, something relatively unique to Baltic birch is that the face veneers are relatively thick. So typically on if you buy a birch plywood or a maple plywood, the face veneers are are extremely thin. They're 1/1/28 less. With Baltic, you have some thickness there on the face veneer, so those are going to be subject to expansion and contraction, whereas on a regular plywood, there's less.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
What about Pluma Ply? FX Core. So
So Pluma Ply has the MDF face.
yeah.
I find Pluma Ply to warp a little bit more than regular plies. I really like, I like Garnica plywood. It's got a poplar core and, birch on both sides, and that seems to work really good for me. I'm not having any telegraphing issues. When I chose to use the Baltic birch, I did it because I thought I was making something a little bit better. Kind of making something a little bit more gutsy because it's heavy. Baltic birch just holds a screw really well.
Yeah, I'm not on Team Baltic. I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm kind of moving away from it. Obviously, you have a lot of chip out with Baltic too.
The splinters are brutal. I just haven't found a reason to use it over anything else in my own work,
Yeah, I'm kind of moving away from it. What I liked about it was the fact that it was heavy, and if you've ever driven a nail or a screw into Baltic birch plywood, that is like, it's just not coming out.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was the plus, but I'm finding that that's the only place that I've ever had any type of a telegraphing issue. So in short, I guess I would choose, depending on the project, this HDF or a high quality furniture grade birch plywood.
So this question we got a couple times. This I chose from Jack Ashmat on Instagram. Repairs. I want to know about repairing veneer. Can you do it?
Don't screw
How
it
do
up.
you do it? Yeah.
You can repair anything. In fact, I've veneered old pieces. So I've bought pieces, used furniture, where the veneer was basically ruined. So instead of trying to fix where the veneer was ruined, I cut it out, cleaned it up, filled it with Bondo, and veneered the whole piece again. And that's something that you could do with something that you make. Now, I think any nice piece of furniture is going to show off as like a ding. So the goal is to not let it get dinged. I think solid wood, though, is more forgiving. You can sand out.
You could steam out. You can steam veneer.
Yeah. You can do furniture repair, but I think any good piece of furniture is going to show a ding. Now, I think like an old table, you could say, okay, it's rustic and it kind of works. That could work in an old solid walnut table or cherry table. That really doesn't work with veneer. If it's really screwed up, you're going to have to figure out a way to repair it like a professional repair. Or let's say it's just a piece that was made 20 years ago. You really could just go and re-veneer the top, if you can find the species. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, well, I guess maybe let's dig a little deeper. So let's say you veneered something and before you put finish on, you have some damage. What would you do there? I guess it depends on what kind of damage too.
If I can sand it out, that's what I would do. If I can't sand it out, I'd veneer over it.
What about
perfect.
Could you fill it?
It's going to be pretty noticeable, I think. So I made a desk a few years ago, and I veneered the drawer fronts, and I just, got kind of distracted while I was sanding the drawer front and went through the veneer.
We had a question about that too. Somebody who hates veneer because they've sanded through it.
Well, don't sand it too much. That was my mistake. I've made a dumb mistake. It's one of those things. I was like, what? Why did I do that? I didn't even need to barely sand it.
Yeah, I could see with plywood, because sometimes you have solid wood and plywood meeting and you're trying to sand the solid wood down. You shouldn't be running into that with veneer because you're doing that sanding prior to the veneering.
So my final sanding, my only sanding with veneer is 220. So I would never hit this piece of veneer in front of us with 180 or 150 or 120. 220, couple runs.
Because this is already more than 220.
Yeah.
This is cut. We didn't really talk about how veneer is produced, but this is cut with a knife.
Yeah.
So it's like a plane shaving.
Yeah. So the only reason why I'm sanding it is like to remove some dirt, kind of get it ready for the finish.
Yeah, you might burnish it by rubbing something. If you were to rub that piece of wood on there, you're gonna get a burnish spot.
Absolutely. So if you kind of crush the grain a little bit, it kind of opens up the grain a little bit more with the palm sander. I just hit it with this little palm sander. Anyway, I went through the veneer, simply re-veneered it.
Yeah. You could try steaming. So if this is before finish, you know, try and steam it out if it's a small scratch or a small dent. I mean, I've had limited success with puttying plywood. I have, or you know, veneer or plywood. I have done it before finish. It's hard because the finish takes differently.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get the color right. So you could try that, but if it already has finish, like John said, try and veneer. You can veneer over it. Wax sticks do work.
Yeah, they do work, and
blend them.
Yeah, and it depends on where the ding is in the piece of furniture. You know, if it's on the side, in the back, not that big of a deal. If it's right in the front.
Yeah, what the end goal is, you know, do you want it to just look a little bit better, or do you need it to look perfect again? Because
Yeah, so I made a desk a couple of years ago that was out in the living room, and then that went into my daughter's room, who does not respect wood. And of course it has, you know, she put a glass down on it, and I'm not worried about it because if I can't sand it out, I'll veneer over that, just the top. It's white oak, riffs on, it's gonna match up, it'll be fine. But really, I think all fine furniture is going to be subject to like kids, you know, kids will just beat up furniture. So my kitchen table is made out of solid cherry, and the finish on it is oil-based polyurethane that you would use on your floor.
Yep.
And even that has, you know, tic-tac-toe games on it and notes because the kids use a piece of paper and ballpoint pen. The nicer furniture, I ask them to, you know, just kind of treat it with a little respect.
oh, it was on the top page, and I'm scrolling through all the pages.
Okay.
Is there a veneer that can survive boys, or should I just wait until they move out to build with it? So touching on that subject.
If you can keep your boys out of one room, like
Put
if
the
you,
veneer in there.
like we would have like one room, like okay, you can horse around everywhere, but in this room, you know, kind of mellow out a little bit. Kids just don't care about furniture, and a lot of adults don't care about furniture. So if you're going to make something for your kids' room, I wouldn't make it out of veneer. Or if you're just getting into it, make a few practice pieces, and that way you can not be so, you know, it's not so precious. And then as, you know, as your kids get older, maybe make some of those nicer pieces that take a little bit more time. But in the meantime, you can kind of build those veneer skills.
Just, you know, corporal punishment for the kids.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. It's amazing though, like I am the only one, even my wife, I'll just say like, she'll just do things. I'm like, whoa, why are you doing that? You know, like
Oh, yeah.
putting a vase down without anything underneath it, like that she had just filled with water. I'm like, well, that's going to leave a mark.
My wife and son were cooking the other night, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table. They're in the kitchen at the stove. Say this is the stove, and I have a pull-out here, spice pull-out. My wife pulls it out. Something fell, and she leans on the top of the thing like this. And I said, "Oh my God!" She's like, "It's the first time." I said, "Yeah, the first time that I saw."
Yeah, yeah. And you're the bad guy.
Yeah.
You're the bad guy for pointing it out.
Yeah.
So real quick, I want to talk about finishing because I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many questions. There's 40, 50 questions.
Which is really great. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. With finishing, I think it's good to veneer a piece and maybe don't do anything with it for a good 4 or 5 days if you have the time, because that contact cement is still setting up. Then when you go to finish it, I would stay away from water-based finishes because the water-based finish is going to expand the wood in the veneer and you can end up with rolls. Now there are workarounds. Generally, if I'm working with veneer, so this is a really beautiful piece of figured eucalyptus, I don't want to put a water-based finish on here because it's just going to take the life right out of this beautiful wood. The only workaround on that is to shellac it first. The shellac is going to seal it and it's going to bring out the beauty of the wood. Get 2 or 3 coats of shellac on there. That's giving it a good seal. It's bringing out the beauty of the wood, and it's also protecting it if you decide to use a water-based finish. At this point, now you've sealed it with shellac, you can spray it with a water-based finish or roll, I don't know, because you don't want to put too much material on there.
Yeah,
just don't
take the
puddle
time
it
to
up.
veneer and then roll your finish on.
Yeah, don't, exactly.
Do a hand rub finish if that's the case.
So then, yeah, that's probably the easiest finish. But if you're going to use a water-based finish, spray it on in light coats after you shellac. Because I have had the issue, and I have had friends who've had the issue of veneering a piece, putting a waterborne finish on it, and then the veneer starts to wave. And then you sort of are frantically trying to figure out what you can do. And at that point, I will use a J-roller and try to work that in a little bit more. I will break out a clothes iron with a piece of fabric on top of the veneer, so I'm not burning or burnishing the veneer at the same time. But try to avoid those headaches by not using a water-based finish, or if you do, use it in that in what I just described. The easiest finish is probably a wipe-on varnish.
Yeah, if you're using shellac, you go like the French polish route.
I always found shellac to be really hard to use as a French polish on a big piece. I can use shellac with good success on small pieces because you can kind of work it fast enough. But on a big, 18-inch by 60-inch long top, I'm going to see marks unless I spray it.
Yeah.
So spraying it, I'm fine. If you don't have the ability to spray, a wipe-on varnish like Waterlox I use a lot. That's going to really do a lot for this grain and really bring out the beauty of it.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Great.
So you think that's it? We pretty much answered?
Yeah, unless you guys want to sit and watch for another hour.
I know. I think we went a while. I hope we're recording.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, good.
So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you learned a couple things. If there's anything that we didn't cover that you want to hear, be sure to leave a comment and we can answer it another time.
Yeah, and I have a ton of veneer projects on my channel. I'll put links to all of them. And I'll be trying to stitch in some B-roll in this video to help answer some of those questions visually. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you next week.